The fluorescent lights of Apex Technologies' executive floor had never seemed colder than the moment Sarah Chen realized she had become the villain in someone else's story. Her hands trembled as she held the crumpled termination notice, the coffee stain in the corner, telling her everything. She needed to know about how carelessly it had been discarded. But it was the handwritten note clipped to it that made her blood run cold. Per your directive, eliminated the liability. Problem solved. She hadn't given any such directive. 3 weeks earlier, Marcus Williams had mopped these same floors at 2 a.m., his shoulders bent not from the weight of his work, but from the exhaustion of being everything to his 8-year-old daughter. Most nights, little Emma sat in the break room doing homework, while her father cleaned the offices of people who would never know his name. Marcus didn't mind being invisible. Invisible meant steady. Invisible meant he could provide. That particular Tuesday started like any other. Marcus was buffing the marble lobby when he heard it. A sound that would unravel everything he'd quietly built. A muffled cry. Then silence. Then another cry, weaker this time. The executive elevator was supposed to be off-limits to maintenance staff. But Marcus didn't hesitate. He found her crumpled against the elevator wall, Sarah Chen herself. The legendary CEO who'd built Apex from a garage startup into a tech empire. At 39, she was the youngest woman to helm a Fortune 500 company. At that moment, she was also unconscious, her lips taking on a dangerous blue tint. Marcus had seen this before. His late wife, Emma's mother, had been diabetic. The signs were unmistakable: severe hypoglycemia. He fumbled for his phone, called 911, then did what his wife had taught him. He always carried glucose tablets now, a habit born from tragedy he couldn't prevent. This time he could. He carefully administered the tablets, elevated her legs, monitored her breathing. When the paramedics arrived 7 minutes later, they told him he'd saved her life. Sarah stirred as they loaded her onto the stretcher, her eyes fluttering open just long enough to meet his. "Thank you," she'd whispered. Marcus had simply nodded, gathered his cleaning supplies, and returned to work. By the time Emma woke up at 6 a.m., curled in a blanket in the break room, he'd finished his shift. They walked to her school together, ate their usual breakfast of convenience store pastries, and he never mentioned that he'd saved one of the most powerful women in America. Just hours before, he thought that was the end of it. But Jennifer Hartwick, Apex's VP of Operations, had watched the security footage. She'd seen Marcus enter the executive elevator, seen him alone with the unconscious CEO, seen him touch her. What she hadn't done was watch long enough to see him save her life. She saw a janitor violating protocol, accessing restricted areas, and physical contact with an executive. In Jennifer's mind, this was a lawsuit waiting to happen. A liability, a problem to be eliminated. Sarah spent 2 days in the hospital, her phone and laptop confiscated by doctors who insisted she rest. By the time she returned to the office, Marcus Williams was gone. His employee badge deactivated, his locker cleaned out, his final paycheck direct deposited with a severance agreement that required his signature for release. He'd signed it. He had no choice. Emma needed to eat. It was Emma who forced the truth into the light, though she didn't know it. A week after her father lost his job, her third-grade class had a special visitor. Apex Technologies had a partnership with local schools, and Sarah Chen herself came to talk about careers in technology. It was a PR opportunity, a chance to seem human and accessible. Emma Williams sat in the back row, her second-hand sneakers tucked under her chair, and raised her hand. "Yes, sweetheart." Sarah smiled warmly. "My daddy saved somebody's life and then he got fired. Is that fair?" The room went silent. Sarah's smile froze. "What do you mean?" He worked at a big building downtown. He helped a lady who was sick, and then they said he broke the rules. Now we can't pay rent." Something cold settled in Sarah's chest. "What's your daddy's name?" "Marcus Williams." Sarah didn't remember much after that. She finished the presentation on autopilot, took photos with students she wouldn't recall, and drove directly back to Apex. She canceled every meeting. She demanded the security footage from that Tuesday night. She watched it 3 times. Each viewing made her angrier. She saw Marcus pause in his work, head tilted, listening. Saw him abandon his equipment and run toward the executive elevator. Saw him kneel beside her collapsed body with such gentle urgency. Saw him save her life while risking everything he had. And then she pulled his termination file. unauthorized access to executive areas, inappropriate physical contact with senior leadership, violation of Employee Conduct Policy Section 4.7b. The report was signed by Jennifer Hartwick and approved by HR, citing Sarah's own standing directive to maintain strict boundaries between executive and service staff, a directive she'd issued 3 years ago after a celebrity CEO at another company had been accused of harassment by cleaning staff. She'd wanted to protect everyone. Instead, her own policy had been weaponized against the man who saved her life. Sarah's hands shook as she reached for the phone, but she stopped. This required more than a phone call. She found Marcus at a playground watching Emma swing. He'd lost weight in 3 weeks, his face hollow with stress. He was filling out job applications on his phone while his daughter played, applying to night shifts at warehouses, overnight stocking positions, anything that would let him still be there when Emma went to school. "Mr. Williams?" He looked up and Sarah watched recognition flicker across his face, followed immediately by fear. People like him had learned to fear people like her. "I'm Sarah Chen. I understand you used to work at Apex Technologies." "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry if there was a problem with my severance paperwork. I signed everything." "There's a problem, Mr. Williams, but not with your paperwork." Sarah sat down on the bench beside him, ignoring the way he tensed. "I'm told you violated company policy 3 weeks ago." His jaw tightened. "I know, ma'am. I'm sorry. I saw someone who needed help and you saved my life." The words hung in the air between them. Emma's laughter rang from the swings, oblivious. "I didn't know it was you specifically," Marcus said quietly. "But even if I had, I would have done the same thing. I couldn't just walk away. And they fired you for it. They fired me for breaking the rules." "I did break them." Sarah felt something crack in her chest. "The rules were wrong. I was wrong. And I'm here to make it right." What happened next became the stuff of corporate legend. Sarah didn't just reinstate Marcus. She promoted him to facilities director, quadrupling his salary. She established the Marcus Williams Emergency Response Fund, training all Apex employees in basic first aid and rewarding those who helped others. She fired Jennifer Hartwick, not for following policy, but for following it blindly, without compassion or context. But more than that, she changed. Sarah started eating lunch in the cafeteria instead of her office, learned the names of security guards and maintenance workers, showed up to the company softball games. She implemented a policy review board that included employees from every level, not just executives. And she kept a photo on her desk that Emma Williams drew for her, 2 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow, with the caption, "Heroes help heroes." 6 months later, at Apex's annual shareholder meeting, Sarah told the story publicly. She stood before investors and cameras and admitted that her company's policies had failed basic humanity. That profit and liability protection had been prioritized over human decency, that a janitor had shown more courage and leadership in 7 minutes than she had in 7 years as CEO. The story went viral, not because it was unusual for corporations to fail their workers, everyone knew they did, but because it was unusual for a CEO to admit it, to take responsibility to actually change. Marcus Williams never sought the spotlight, but he used his platform anyway. He advocated for better wages for service workers. He spoke at schools about the dignity of all honest work. He told Emma every night that what mattered wasn't whether you were noticed, but whether you did the right thing when nobody was watching. On the anniversary of that Tuesday night, Sarah and Marcus started a tradition. They visited schools together, telling their story, but Emma always came too. Because the real lesson wasn't that a janitor saved a CEO, or that a CEO made it right. The lesson was simpler and harder than that. We save each other. And then, if we're lucky, if we're brave enough to be better than our worst policies and coldest instincts, we build a world where nobody has to choose between doing the right thing and keeping their job. Sarah still kept those glucose tablets in her desk drawer next to Emma's drawing. A reminder that the distance between executive and janitor, between power and vulnerability, was exactly 7 minutes and 1 human heart willing to act. Some nights Marcus still mops floors, but now he supervises a team of 40. He makes sure they all have health care, fair wages, and the explicit permission to help anyone who needs it, rules be damned. And Emma? She wants to be a CEO when she grows up, but the kind who remembers that every person in her building from the boardroom to the break room, has a story worth hearing and a life worth protecting. That's the kind of success you can't measure in market share or stock prices, but it's the kind that actually matters.